Good morning, lovely community. Our first reading for this morning is from the letter of First Peter. It reads, Above all, love each other deeply, as it covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others, as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. If anyone speaks, they should do so as one who speaks the very words of God. And if anyone serves, they should do so with the strength that God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Jesus Christ. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. This ends the reading. I really thought that this reading was applicable for us as a community during these really trying times of the pandemic. I know Pastor Katie and I, it's one of our greatest hopes that we can inspire you guys to be the priesthood of all believers and to really share your gifts with other people and figure out what it looks like for you to live into the kingdom of heaven. So, yeah, Pastor Katie, I'll give the floor to you.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Morgan. I think at this point, everyone in this universal priesthood, we just want to hear. Do you have any thoughts or any prayers that you'd like to uplift to the whole community so that we can pray with you?
Think I don't know. I think so many of us are like mirrors to each other. And I'm really going on tangents, but like it's been just so exhausting in the pandemic to feel like you don't have any of those mirrors of God to like reflect back at you things that are good. And I think as we're here in seminary, just like studying, like where are the mirrors? Like where are like the rivers? Like where can we all come together and look in and be like, it's not just all about us. Like it's all about us together, but it's not about us singular. I don't know.
Yeah.
And as clergy, like we're not to solve, but to like help people move, can help people go on those journeys to God, holding their faults and holding their like willingness to receive at the same time. The word universal can be for people getting abused by a system. Like when someone says like, this is a universal experience, or like, this is inherently good, like this is universally good, like usually who that's benefiting is a specific male, like white, like it's wealthy, like, but universal kind of creates this like blanket of like, wait. And so it's kind of made me like, I'd never made that connection of like, I literally like studied so many things of like that abusive power and I didn't connect it to like universal priesthood. And it just makes me think like about, like who gets left out of that, like what do we assume universal means and what does our assumption actually like
Do.
Yeah, I don't know. I've been thinking about that.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense to me, and you're right. Like, I think, like, that's something that I feel like us, kind of in our situation, maybe weren't necessarily trained to, like, be suspicious of. Kind of like what you're saying, the suspicion, like, hermeneutics of suspicion or whatever. But I do feel like that is very true, and I do feel like the universal priesthood is definitely a cool theology in a lot of ways. But I will say that usually when people are thinking of a universal priesthood, they're thinking of people kind of mechanically working together
towards like this very similar goal, and like
Mhm.
these pieces are kind of like, yeah, like they're just working very systematically, and like when in reality, like part of being the priesthood of all believers could be like messing that system up. Like we were talking yesterday about how my pastor is kind of talking about like just the different views of suffering that kind of have come up, and it got me thinking about like other kind of myths or like lies that I feel like I've kind of been told about pastoral things or like what it means to be a pastor. And I don't even want to call this like a myth or a lie, because there is truth to it. Like I've even heard people talk, like teachers like kind of talking about this in the seminary, like, but part of like a huge part of my call journey, and like the majority of my call journey, has been the fact that like the church has been a place where I have found life-giving community in a way that I didn't really even know existed, and was kind of like felt connected to people in a way that I was like, whoa, like I didn't even know that this was a thing. Like this is what life is all about, you know, like this is the point, I guess. And now what is kind of scaring me a lot about kind of this next phase as like pastor is my pastor, other pastors, like not just my pastor, other pastors I've talked to, and like people even here at the seminary, I feel like really kind of nail home this idea of like the pastor is not necessarily like a part of the community, you know, like the pastor is like separate, and like I don't know, like my pastor used to always just tell me like that like pastors are lonely, like pastors don't even really like it's hard for them to have friends in the congregation because of the role that they're in. And so that's really hard for me, because it's like, man, like what initially attracted me to this was feeling that acceptance and feeling that sense of community. And now like you're kind of telling me that if I want to take on some sort of leadership role, like I have to sacrifice that, is sometimes how it feels. So yeah, like I'm just kind of wondering like, how much of that do we take seriously? How much of that do we just kind of be like, I don't really care, I'm going to be friends with people, like I'm going to do what I want, you know what I mean? Like, or, I don't know, just, or is there a new way to imagine community where that doesn't have to be a thing?
Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate A4 was my own gate. I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor and wailing. "Help," said the flight agent. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and spoke haltingly. "Shudawa, shubiduk abiti? Stanti shwe. Min fadlik, shubit siwi?" The minute she heard any words she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled entirely. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, we're fine. You'll get there, just later. Who is picking you up? Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons, just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic, and found out, of course, they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took up 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo. We were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around the gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in. The shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost.